Professor Steven Pinker is a brilliant and controversial neuroscientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. Pinker recently published a provocative bestseller called The Language Instinct, in which he argued that language is built into human brains in just the same way that, say, nest building is built into birds. His 7 wonders of the world include the bicycle, the mystery of consciousness, and the linguistic genius of children.
I am the world's biggest appreciator of language. I think it's a magnificent ability, but I do think it's been overrated because a lot of people assume that we think in our native language, that I'm thinking in English right now, and that perhaps the grammatical structure of the language has a stranglehold on thought, and that we can only think the thoughts that our language makes available to us. I think we think in images. I think we think in abstract logical propositions. I think we think in a variety of media, and that words are far too clumsy to underlie our everyday thought processes. Also, language is ambiguous. Groucho Marx said, I once shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got into my pajamas, I'll never know. You have a particular string of words with 2 meanings. That's where the humor comes from. And the more you put language under a microscope, you see what its logic is. You see that it's really a set of pointers to a much richer store of knowledge that we all have and use, and that makes language possible to begin with.
We've had wheeled vehicles for thousands of years, but we've had self-propelled wheeled vehicles for only a little more than 100 years. And my first wonder of the world is the first self-propelled vehicle to be invented, the bicycle. When bicycles were first invented in the 19th century, they tried out all kinds of crazy designs. A big wheel in the front and a big wheel in the back, and a person inside an even bigger wheel, and levers and sprockets and so on. After a few years, the design standardized to one that we pretty much still have with us today, that might be fairly close to an optimum. I remember reading an article in Scientific American about 20 years ago on the energy efficiency of different forms of transportation in both the animal kingdom and human technologies. A person on foot is already fairly energy efficient. A person walking is more efficient than a rabbit or a light airplane, although not as efficient as a salmon or a horse or a jet airliner. But a person on a bicycle is more energy efficient than any of them. A person on a bicycle can move a pound a given speed with fewer calories than any known animal or any known machine. I also admit to finding bicycles beautiful. They're a particularly elegant form of sculpture, and the elegance comes from the way the efficiency of their design is apparent to the eye. A bicycle looks like it wants to go forward. I think the surprise of seeing such a graceful, delicate structure move hundreds of pounds so quickly that makes it an object of wonder.
When the English philosopher John Stuart Mill was a boy, he made an alarming discovery. At least he was alarmed, that the world was soon going to run out of music. And if you only have a finite number of notes and you arrange them for a fixed length of time, there is mathematically only a fixed number of possible melodies, and he was worried that the world would soon run out of them. Now, the story amuses us now because we know that at the time that Mill sunk into this melancholy, Brahms and Tchaikovsky hadn't even been born, to say nothing of entire genres of music that Mill couldn't have dreamed of. Everything from ragtime to reggae to jazz to American Broadway musicals to rock and roll and so on. It doesn't look like we're going to face a melody shortage anytime soon, but still, we have to ask what went wrong with Mill's logic. Well, what went wrong is that music is a combinatorial system. One where you have a fixed number of elements or building blocks. In the case of music, a certain number of notes. Let's say we restrict ourselves to even only 8 notes in a scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Well, you've got 8 choices for the first note of a melody, and then you've got 8 choices for the second note. So there's 64 ways in which a piece of music can begin, only getting you to the first 2 notes. Then there are 8 choices for the third, and 8 choices for the fourth, and 8 choices for the fifth. By the time you get to the first 5 notes of a piece, there are already 32,000 possibilities. And as you work your way through, it gets bigger and bigger. So 8 notes down, I'm already in 16 million different possibilities. As you work your way to a full musical piece, the numbers are almost beyond imagining. And I think the human mind isn't really good at grasping the sheer numbers involved. Combinatorial systems account for a lot of the complexity and diversity of the world. Atoms are combinatorial systems. Molecules are combinations of the same 92 chemical elements. All of the information to build a yeast cell or a human being comes from rearranging just the 4 bases of the DNA molecule. Closer to home, language is a combinatorial system. I have a toy here called Magnetic Poetry for Kids, and I've composed my own sentence here. I have the baby fed a butterfly to the cat, which is a brand new sentence and probably a brand new thought. I doubt that you've ever had this particular thought before. And with a little more rearranging, I could have, say, the baby fed the cat to a dinosaur. Every one of these combinations conveys a new idea. You know exactly what it means. You've probably never had that thought before, but because the language gives us the resources for combining these elements in an unlimited number of ways, we're never going to run out of things to say. Number of ideas. It's only a finite size. There are only so many different ideas that you can pack into a hunk of matter this big. But if it's equipped with an inventory of elements and rules for combining them, words or letters or notes or motives, and can spin out new combinations, there's no limit to the number of different products of the imagination that you can have.
I got some shark gloves.
Some shark gloves?
Yes.
Shark gloves. Oh, the shark gloves that you were wearing this morning?
Yes.
In the play? Ah, yes. Where did you get those from?
A place that sold flowers.
The mind of a child is one of the most interesting things there is. My graduate school advisor said it's fine if you want to study language development in children, but there's one thing that you should realize, that is that you'll never really understand why children are doing what they're doing. It's very, very good advice, even though he devoted his career to trying and I'm devoting my career to trying. But the mind of a child is the most complicated and fascinating thing in the universe. Any of the world's 6,000 languages can be learned by a human infant, without lessons, just by exposure. I think it's one of the wonders of the world, and it exists in the mind of every normal human baby. Language is an instinct. It's not a cultural invention like the wheel or agriculture, and it's not passed down the way we pass down other bits of our culture, like how the government works or how to tie your shoes. But that children are designed to pick up language, just as birds are designed to learn how to migrate or to sing, and spiders are designed to spin webs. That natural selection shaped the human brain in order to for children to pick up the grammatical structure of speech around them.
I use polystyrene, paper, and some boxes and some of old Daddy's things, but there were some batteries and I thought they would be good, but they weren't because I thought it could work as electric one. going all up.
Or with a light coming on.
I think the child has to be equipped with a set of analyzers for language. And we can actually hear the child do this analysis when we hear them make errors.
I went to Woolworths and we tried to spend our gift vouchers and we did, and I spent a dinosaur, and his ears can come off and on. And
His ears can come off and on.
Yeah.
Oh.
They're very charming, and parents collect them. They relish these errors. But to a linguist, they're never random garbage. They're never just a few corrupted bits in a program, but they always make a good deal of sense when you think about how the language is put together. Take this example. It took me several weeks to figure out what was going on. Mommy, why did he disappear? This is after a waiter removed some dishes from the table. He's dissing it appear. Why did he disappear? Now, where did this come from? It obviously isn't random, and it actually shows this particular 3-year-old girl has been doing 3 kinds of analysis on the sentences that she's heard from people around her. One is that she's been chopping speech stream into words, which is itself a remarkably difficult problem. On the printed page, words are separated by little bits of white space, and that's rather convenient for readers. But actual speech doesn't have little silences between the words. They all run together, and if you were to look at a tracing of the sound wave when someone talks, you would see no gaps between the words. They're inserted there by the brain quite unconsciously when you already know a language. If you don't know a language, if you're listening to Hungarian and you don't speak Hungarian, it just sounds like a continuous stream, and so does English to a Hungarian speaker.
Egész nemzedékek, fiatal nemzedékek nőttek fel úgy, hogy erről gyakorlatilag semmit nem hallottak.
One of the things the child has to do is snip the speech stream into words.
A legtöbb családban a szüleiktől is.
In the case of disappear, the child was a little bit too zealous in cutting it up into words and thought that disappear was 2 words, and we can tell that because the child stuck another word, it, in between them. The second thing the child has done is now that she's segregated appear as a word, she's got to figure out its part of speech category, whether it's a noun or a verb or a preposition and so on. And she has guessed that it's the grammatical category called a particle. These are words like away and apart and along, which we use in combination with verbs to express meanings like take it apart, put it away, and so on. And the child is using disit appear as if it's an exact analog of blow it away or take it apart. Appear is similar to apart or along in the child's mind. And the third thing the child has done is figured out that verbs come in 2 flavors, if you want. You might remember your English grammar teacher telling you that verbs can either be transitive or intransitive. Transitive means that the verb takes an object, as in John devoured the meal. You can't say John devoured, he has to devour something. An intransitive verb is one that cannot take an object. John dined. You can't say John dined the pizza. Disappear in English is intransitive. The book can disappear, but you can't disappear a book. But lots of other verbs can go both ways. The ball can bounce, you can bounce the ball. The butter can melt, you can melt the butter. And this girl has taken the rule that converts an intransitive verb into a transitive one and over-applied it to disappear, which is illegal for adults, but which actually follows the pattern in much of the rest of the language. So one little error shows how much computation has to be going on in the mind of the child just to go from the noises coming out of other people's mouths to an ability to speak and understand for the rest of her life. Lots of animals communicate. Bees dance, birds sing, dogs bark, and so on. I don't think you see anything like human language in other animal communication systems, because we have 2 tricks that other animals, as far as I know, haven't independently stumbled on. One of them is grammatical structure. Even in very complicated animal signals, like the songs of birds, you can't look at each piece, figure out what it means, and then figure out the meaning of the whole thing by looking at how they're arranged. The other thing is that animals probably don't ever actually refer to things, refer to objects. You don't have animals with a particular call that means the snake. They're always mixed up with an emotion. It's beware of the snake, or watch out, or I'm in the mood for love, or get out of my face. They're almost always imperative statements or announcements where the things that they refer to are mixed up with the emotional content of the message. So it's not that animals couldn't in principle evolve language, other animals that is, but none of them seems to have so far.
Inspiration, education, I like you. Down, down, baby, down like the roller coaster. Sweet, sweet baby, no place to go. Won't do the dishes, lazy, lazy. Stole a bit of candy, greedy, greedy. Beena, beena, box of beena, oola, walla, walla, beena. Inspiration, education, I like you.
What would life be like without the camera? We'd have to rely on our own visual images to recall what our friends and relatives looked like years before, what we looked like years before, and for any event that we personally did not witness, something that took place before we were born or at a place that we couldn't have traveled to, we'd have to rely on the verbal testimony of an eyewitness, which is obviously very sketchy and riddled with distortions. We're so used to having photography as an extension of our own experience that we're apt to forget that when we see a photograph or watch television, we're actually the victims of an illusion. After all we're seeing is smears of pigment on a sheet of paper or flickering dots of phosphor on a piece of glass, but we interpret it as a version of reality. The trick was really first explained by Leonardo da Vinci, and we call the principle the Da Vinci pane in his honor. The idea is if you were to put a piece of glass in front of an object and could somehow trace the contours of light and dark that you see through the glass, then when you take away the object, the eye should see the exact same pattern of light from the pane of glass that it did when the object was present, and so you could have an illusion of seeing something that isn't really there. Now, of course, it's rather cumbersome to put a piece of glass in front of an object and have an artist sketch it out, and the tricks of photography are doing all of those steps automatically. The first thing you have to do is you've got to get the piece of glass to record the patterns of light and dark on its own, and to do that you coat it with a chemical that changes color when light hits it, rather like the way a sofa cushion will fade if it's left in the sun too long, only quicker. Having grown up in an age in which a camera did exist, I feel like I have been a participant in every war since the Civil War. I've been to the moon. I've seen the wreck of the Titanic. I'm personally acquainted with all of history's great leaders and artists. It's a manufacturer of illusions that expands our experience. But the other wonderful thing is the uncanny similarity between the camera and the eyes of animals, as if the engineers who invented the camera and natural selection in designing animal eyes had to solve the same problems and were forced to very similar solutions. In In the early part of the 19th century, some theologians used the exquisite engineering of the eye as an argument for the existence of God. Only a conscious creator could have shaped the different parts to do something as difficult as forming an image. And then, of course, Darwin, who had an alternative explanation, felt a responsibility to give an alternative account of how an eye could have evolved. And indeed, the eye didn't evolve just once, but 40 different times in the course of evolution, in 40 different branches of the animal kingdom. 40 different times, natural selection seemed to be going out of its way to solve the problem of how to get a representation of reality from the light that sprays off objects. Everywhere you look nowadays, you see one of these posters and postcards and books with the magic eye or deep vision stereograms. These are the displays that you look at with crossed eyes or with a dreamy, distant gaze that suddenly spring into life as a vivid apparition of three-dimensional objects suspended in space. And what they tap into is this marvelous gadget inside our heads called stereo vision. The ability to see in depth by using information coming out of the difference between the two eyes' views. You could fool someone into seeing depth if you could just give a separate picture to each eye that is slightly different. This magic, this vivid sense of depth, has been exploited by illusionists and tricksters for years to give us the pleasure of seeing something in depth. Stereo vision is one of the marvelous things that was put into our brains. We could probably get along reasonably well without it because there's a lot of other information about depth in the world. As you move your head from side to side or look around objects or simply see how they project on the ground in front of you, you get some information about depth. But stereo vision gives you a particularly vivid extra source of information. It probably came about in evolution as a way of penetrating camouflage.
Okay, any more snipers about?
Whether it's in human military camouflage or the camouflage that's been invented by many prey animals, every feature of a surface looks exactly like its background. The animal is colored like a leaf and hides out among the leaves. If you have a creature that can see in stereo, then it can take advantage of the fact that from each eye's view, different bits of the background are covered, can use the geometry to make the object pop out in depth in the predator's mind, and the predator can penetrate the camouflage and see something that would be invisible by any other means. When I was a boy, I went out fishing for the first time with a friend and the friend's father. And I looked in horror as the man took a worm out of a box and cut it in half and impaled it on the fishing hook. And I said, "Isn't that a terribly cruel thing that you're doing?" And he explained to me that the worm doesn't actually feel any pain, that it has a set of reflexes and nerve action that make the body flail this way and that. But there actually wasn't any self inside the worm that was feeling pain at that moment. It was just a mechanical cause and effect. What is it to be conscious? What's the difference between reacting to stimuli in the world and moving your muscles in a certain way, and there actually being a self that experiences a certain wavelength as redness and a certain chemical as saltiness and a certain kind of pressure as pain. Is this just, as they say, an academic question? Is it just the kind of thing that keeps you up at night in your dorm room when you're a college student, hashing it back and forth for the sheer intellectual fun of it? No, it really has consequences. Is it a sin to boil a lobster alive? I don't know how to answer that question, but I know it's a terribly important question. Are we doing harm when we circumcise an 8-day-old boy without anesthetic? Is he flailing around reflexively when he's screaming his head off? Or is there already a person in there who's actually feeling terrible pain? Why is consciousness a wonder of the world? Well, in a sense, it's the only wonder of the world. It is the world as each one of us experiences it. I wouldn't agree to let myself be replaced by a cleverly convincing robot that did exactly what I did, lived my life, interacted with my friends and family, wrote my books, ate the foods that I would eat, because there wouldn't be a me inside that robot who actually enjoyed the pecan pie or enjoyed interacting with friends and family. The being alive is really the same as the problem of being conscious. There is no other wonder of the world, but on the other hand, we can't say anything about why the universe of matter and energy and time and space should contain this mysterious commodity called consciousness at all. It's even possible that the human mind is incapable of grasping the solution to the problem, that if the mind is a product of evolution, if our brain is a gadget that natural selection designed to solve certain problems, like how to put tools together and how to figure one another out, there's no guarantee that it will solve any problem that anyone is ever able to pose. There may be questions that are so far beyond the reach of what a human mind can conceptualize that we don't know how to begin formulating a solution. And it's quite possible that consciousness is a problem like that. If so, it would be the ultimate tease, because the most obvious thing there is, our own awareness, our own consciousness, may be forever beyond our grasp.